and welcome to all of you joining us for the PSI Academic Mentorship on Fostering Equity, Diversity, and Inclusiveness. My name is Jonathan Sherbino. I'm the Assistant Dean of Merit. This is an initiative, a two-day conference that's brought to you by Merit, Department of Medicine, Faculty Affairs, and sponsored by Physician Services Incorporated. Before we begin, I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge that the land in which we're gathering is the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations, protected by the Wampum Agreement, the dish with one spoon. Let's just take a moment to reflect and understand for yourself how you understand this and how you contextualize this within the idea of our academic mentoring conference. As I reflect for myself, I think of the role of the institutional structures and how we mentor for diversity. And it strikes me that we have to think and address about the missing and disappeared First Nations women and what our institutional responsibilities are there. And that we should never for a second forget them or continue to work to address this problem that is terrible and evil in nature. I do want to acknowledge the work that PSI has done in supporting the conference that we've been offering for the last 2 days. PSI is a nonprofit physician-centered organization to improve the delivery of healthcare to Ontarians through research and education. They have a number of different funding programs, operating grants, salary support, and community and education initiatives. Their funding stream shows remarkable success in terms of how they support both resident research in the community, and through knowledge translation initiatives. You can see the variety and the diversity of the impact that PSI is having on our province. And how they are continuing to engage via visiting scholar programs such as the one that you're participating in here today, and a number of other educational initiatives. If you want to understand more about PSI or connect with them, here are a number of ways. I just also want to recognize that the Executive Director, Sam Moore, is joining us as well this morning. If you were unable to attend yesterday's plenary sessions and be a part of the small groups, it's certainly a loss for you. The conversations that we've had to this point have been remarkable. I've been challenged, I have learned new things, and I've had the opportunity to engage, although through the challenges of virtual engagement, to engage in ideas and to connect with people that are interested in how we can change and transform our local community here, but also to connect with others beyond the McMaster family. It is my very great delight to welcome Dr. Srita Verma as our plenary speaker this morning. Dr. Verma is overly accomplished and has had a profound impact for a sustained period of time in health systems and health education. Currently, she's the Dean and President and CEO of the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. She is a true double threat, trained as a family physician here at our alma mater, McMaster University, for which I think we should take great delight in recognizing, but she's also trained as a lawyer at the University of Ottawa. She has served in Canada's Foreign Service, working as a diplomat, and with United Nations High Commission for Refugees in both Sudan and Ethiopia. She is a world traveler, an international leader with recognition as a scholar in leadership development, distributed and interprofessional education, Indigenous health, physician wellness, health human resources, and workforce planning. Most notable, I think Dr. Verma would be regarded as someone who can be exposed to a very challenging and complex problem and come up with innovative solutions. And so I think her insights into the idea of how do we improve equity, diversity, and inclusiveness from an institutional lens in our mentoring programs is a thorny problem that deserves her considerable thought. And so with that, I welcome Dr. Verma.
Thank you, Dr. Sherbino, although I fondly call you John, my favorite son in Hamilton. You know, known John for a very long time and have loved watching his career. And as I said in the chat, Teresa Chan is here, another fabulous person. There are so many great people at McMaster that and because it is my alma mater, I open with the sense of a great sense of imposter syndrome. What can I tell you people who are already amazing people and leaders in education at Mac about mentorship? So I hope this will be more of a dialogue. My conflict of interest declaration is that I have very strong opinions about mentorship and how academic medicine is not always reaching that potential. So I probably have some critical opinions that may be in conflict with the conservative conventional opinions. My declaration is that McMaster has offered me an honorarium for the presentation, which I will be donating if I can to a worthy cause such as the student bursary cause. That said, I also want to reflect on the territory acknowledgement. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Just checking in.
We can hear you fine.
Great. So with the territory acknowledgement, and as you know, NOSM is situated on, basically 800,000 kilometers. And so there are many treaties and many unceded territories upon which NOSM is located. But one of the most inspiring yet also difficult areas is that there were so many residential schools in our geography and community with whom we have great partnerships who teach our students, because we have an immersion program 4 weeks in first year that our students are in Indigenous community. But the impact of legacy of the residential schools is profound, even because it is only more recently that they were closed. And that profound trans and intergenerational impact is huge. So when we talk about and think about mentorship, our Western settler ways aren't necessarily relevant to the population of Indigenous students, residents, and faculty. So I just want to bear that in mind as I bring up a few general slides on mentorship. So sharing my screen. Where is that, Joan? Oh, there it is. I see it. Sorry.
Just right on the bottom.
Don't you hate it when somebody does that when they should really know how to?
I'm going to say that I'm pretty sure that you've been on 1,000 Zoom calls in the last year.
So can you see this now? Mentorship, it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So my objectives are to define mentorship in the institutional setting. Some of this will be very familiar to you, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. To describe a mentoring relationship in the organizational realm. Answering the question, why should an organization like NOSM or MAC or any medical school systemically invest in mentoring health professionals? How is this done in a way that promotes equity, diversity, and inclusiveness? And I want to thank and acknowledge PSI for this opportunity and for, of course, supporting the program at MAC, and say hi to Sam Moore, who is here today. Things that Dr. Shabrino asked me to consider were, how do you incorporate mentoring relationships within a complex, unadaptive system? And honestly, I always say that medical schools are like the ultimate luxury cruise liner. It takes a lot to move that cruise liner even a quarter of an inch. Take, for example, our incredibly complex and unadaptive accreditation standards, and how difficult it is to even make a change. It takes up to 24 months to make a change in those standards. The question he asked was, how does a dean develop faculty and lead so that mentorship is valued? This is where my imposter syndrome comes in, and I'll talk about two-way mentorship, which I think is, much more relevant than thinking that someone is the wise guru on the top of the hill. How are resources aligned to achieve this? We'll talk a little bit about the fact that these resources, particularly faculty development and particularly soft programs, are the first to get cut in a fiscally restrained environment, and what we should do about that. And then finally, what is the return on investment in formalizing mentoring structures? What are the dangers? So, many of you know that the concept of the mentor came out of ancient Greek, the Odyssey, and it was aligned with the view that a mentor would have advanced age, life wisdom, would not only be a friend and a nurturing influence, but would provide trusted guidance uh, to the young male, predominantly male, aspiring athletic Greek leader. And then, of course, over the years, these are all social, in the media, but these are the kinds of people who are affecting our perception of what is mentorship, and anything from someone from The Walking Dead to the Game of Thrones, or of course, it seems to be a lot of people with superpowers, or in fact, people who are in futuristic. But the two people that are, you can see are, of course, the divine Meryl Streep in The Devil Loves Prada. Although she wasn't a mentor, she was more of a tormentor for the poor woman. And of course, Oprah, who's seen as being the mentor for everybody. But really, is this really mentors? And do you really think that that's what mentorship is? My favorite is, of course, the Mr. Umagi from The Karate Kid, who taught him to wax on and wax off. Why do we have mentorship in academic medicine? And of course, we have really good evidence. There's been actually not only Pelepu, Levinson, and even more recently, but I do like these two articles by Anita Pelepu and Wendy Levinson. I'll admit that Anita was a classmate of mine at McMaster and is now in UBC. But we do know that mentored faculty feel more confident than their peers. They are more likely to have a more productive research career. They certainly feel more support for their research, and they report higher career satisfaction. So here you are at Mac, and honestly, what am I talking to you guys about? Because you actually set up the best faculty development, which is a form of mentorship program in Canada. But I talk with others who are emerging into this area. I mean, I can't believe after at least 17 years at NAWSM, which has been in existence for that period of time, we still don't actually have a formal mentorship program. And so I'll admit that setting up a mentorship program is something that takes a number of elements and is not something that is different than setting up a residency program in emergency medicine or family medicine. You have to have goals, objectives of training requirements, and of course, methods of evaluation. Plus, it has to be financially supported. So the first thing I think you have to identify are what are the characteristics of prized mentors. And prized mentors, this is a busy one, but they're really people who don't just say, well, I'm only here to teach clerks, and it's not my job to mentor people. As you know, the moment you start teaching in academic medicine and in clinical medicine, you're being watched all the time. So being responsive, available, enthusiastic, passionate, I think these are important characteristics. Being knowledgeable and well respected in the field, having some clout in the field, particularly in clinical medicine. I just finished watching the news this morning, and there was Isaac Bogosh, who's an early development in early development of his clout, but then of course side by side with David Naylor, who is the clout master. So watching these two equally knowledgeable and well respected in the field was fascinating. The ability to communicate is very important. Mentors who are mumblers and emotionally stunted, that they can't actually effectively communicate, can get into difficulty. To a certain extent, there has to be a selflessness and a sensitivity to the needs of mentees. And this is very challenging. I'll say as a dean, I've become the mentor to the entire medical school, it seems, because I get reached out to by students, faculty, staff, constantly. And there are days where I'm not selfish. You value the mentoring relationship. They have high standards and expectations, recognize potential, and celebrate the achievements of the mentees, and support, enables, and advocates and protects the mentees. All that to say that no, it's not sainthood, and to a certain extent, we'll all fail in all of these characteristics. I know I fail in almost all of them. So I project that actually mentorship can be, in a way that provides multiple perspectives and different feedback from multiple people, because it takes a village. And of course, there is a bit of equity and diversity here in this slide, but these guys were iconic bad mentors in that they basically tore people down. Remember the early days when poor people like some very bad singer would be ripped to shreds by these guys? That's not mentorship, and that's not the American Idol way is still not, I think, the way to have mentorship. And then, of course, people like Dilbert who actually don't even know what mentorship is. Thanks to my mentoring, someday you'll be just like me. Someone please drive a stake through my heart. Hurry. Apparently, I don't know what mentoring is. There needs to be some formal education and understanding of what mentorship is if you're going to have a program. And as well, as I said, many mentorship programs should have two-way. I did get permission for this cartoon, by the way. But basically, the person that you're mentoring learns, but you learn from them as well. So in faculty career development in academic medicine, as I said, from the original pictures of all of those people in cinema and TV, that it is a multifaceted relationship. And I think everybody who's engaged in mentorship knows that you will not find one single mentor to be your, guide like it is in the Odyssey. You'll need multiple mentors, and you'll build in a mosaic of advocates, coaches, advisors, learning partners, and cheerleaders. And you will learn to deal with the fact that they may disagree with you. The primary goal is to have someone who's nurturing your professional development, and you see yourself as their protege, and they see you as a protege, but it might be for multiple reasons. So take a research relationship. For me, it would have been someone engaged in primary care research. And it would have been, for me, somebody like Bert Whistle or Susan Phillips at Queen's when I started my career, and they were starting the first primary care research network at Queen's. And they really did actually bring along quite a few of us. But when it came to the deanery and to actually even just understanding or answering the question, oh my God, I got this job, now what do I do? There were a number of people like Carol Herbert, who was the dean at Schulich Western at the time, Kathy Whiteside, who was the dean at U of T, but as well as David Naylor and quite a few others, a few CEOs of hospitals like Catherine Zahn at CAMH, who all of them I turned to from time to time for advice. And for a dean, the question that comes up is, well, is this even important? I don't know if you've had the conversation with Paul O'Byrne, but, I think he's probably the kind of guy who would say, yep, mentorship at our school is important because people will, we will actually achieve a lot in terms of the success and support and confidence of our faculty. It's always the second question. It's actually the wrong second question. Can we afford it? It should never be the question. We should always try to afford it. And we can afford it, even if we don't have to put money towards certain programs. But thanks to PSI and other agencies, we can find some support. But really, a lot of mentorship is not necessarily associated with an additional cost. It's actually volunteerism. What's the return on investment? Well, it's like any student. Even if one student emerges with the sense of social accountability at NASM, I feel it's a success. Even if one faculty member emerges feeling like they have a prolific and exciting and inspiring career ahead of them in academic medicine, then the mentorship is successful. And what's the evidence? Well, I think I've shown you that. I think, I've got the citations for the papers, mostly the Palepu papers and the Levinson papers, but, there's very tangible evidence that mentorship leads to recruitment and retention. And retention in particular in a satisfied, highly satisfied career. The culture of mentorship should seek to leverage an institution's most valuable resource, which is its people. Now, I want to pause here because I actually believe this is a fundamental cultural and mental shift that needs to occur amongst the leadership. The leadership believes in the way academic medicine is run, that the most valuable resource might very well be its research faculty. But if you don't mentor research faculty to be successful, provide them with the research support and the feedback and the ongoing development of their applications for their grants, their development of proposals, then they will never succeed. But the other most valuable resource is its teachers. And to really, truly be successful as an academic institution, and I'm what they call an education dean. I'll always be student-centric. To maintain and accelerate growth across all of its missions, but including its education missions, is critical. And it shouldn't happen once every 7 or 8 years in the accreditation lead up, or talking about accreditation by CACMs. This should be an ongoing nurturing of the plant of faculty development and mentorship in education and in research. The third arm, in my opinion, is administrative mentorship, and to actually not hope that by happenstance people become an academic leader like John Charbino or Teresa Chan, that they actually are, you can grow administrative leaders, you can grow deans, and you can make sure that there's solid succession planning in the institution. So mentoring today, in my opinion, is not static. It's very dynamic. It involves active participation. If I am asked to be a mentor, you're going to be doing a lot of work. And we're going to be meeting once a month. And we're going to be setting targets. And it's just like any other learning experience. I'm going to be evaluating. You're also going to be evaluating me. There therefore has to be a lot of trust in the relationship. And, if you fall in love and you want to have sex, then you probably should stop having a mentorship relationship. It'll change for sure, but that does happen. It is a very personal choice, and style, it plays a big role. I sometimes have self-selected out people for mentorship so that they'll agree with what I'm going to do. That's very validating. It's probably not the best thing to do, but sometimes in the stage of life where you feel like, you're being beaten down and you only have certain things, you do want some people who will help validate your decisions. You should be very flexible. And as I said, it takes a village. And then the last point is that, it's very important in these mentorship relationships, the multiple ones that are built, that there be a no fault clause built into the relationship. That, if people are giving you, or you're working through, which is really more of a psychotherapy type relationship where you're working through the issues, that there can't be circling back to someone and say, well, you told me to take this job as dean and now I'm miserable. So I think the no fault piece is really important. Functional mentorship is actually identifying. So if you have a program, I think that the program has to help faculty members identify their specific needs. It might very well be a need in dealing with a learner who has a learning disability, and they just have difficulty managing that problem. And that means they have to be matched up with a mentor with those specific skills. Others often mentorship programs are around people who are coming together naturally, and they start to mentor as a group on developing a grant, a new curriculum, a new area of research, or a new clinical service. And that relationship usually lasts until the project is completed. And then it continues on as somebody, that you might know or be friends with. But in fact, it has been a mentorship relationship. Anybody who's been through a Royal College site survey together knows that the group bonds as a mutual mentorship group, and then, may continue on afterwards. If there is going to be a mentorship program, I think there needs to be a start process. There needs to be a senior person who is capable of managing it. And there needs to be support from the chief and chair, and to look at whether in fact you need to develop an organizational leadership program at a regional, national, professional organization, like the chairs of pediatrics or the program directors in pediatrics or internal medicine. And of course, I believe there needs to be a faculty affairs or CEPD or faculty development dean. There needs to be a decanal position. So mentorship can then become a small group, as I said, that decides that on a particular theme, like the anti-racism strategy that, McMaster's probably developing, or the strategy around elevating Indigenous health. Those are really contemporary areas in which there can be actually mentorship built into those group developments. They can be peer mentorship, so that, for example, we've recently, and I'm not sure if you guys did, but participated in the Orange program with the remote immunity, and peers across transport medicine have now begun to think that transport medicine might be an area of great interest. So peer development amongst that group, and that I've seen at the Royal College emerge when particular areas of focused interest or focused competence come forward. And that is a form of mentorship of each other across the country. I think it's very reasonable to create a group of mentors at MAC who are outside the institution. I would highly recommend alumni as one of the ways to develop a mentorship program, because it's sometimes not a great idea just to have everybody from the inbreeding of our own school. And of course, identify the realm from junior to senior faculty who might be able to co-mentor each other. I can guarantee you that most senior faculty need mentorship when it comes to the use of technology. Family and friends can be mentors. I think that, that's a different kind of mentorship, and it's not relevant to academic medicine unless your parents are doctors. And then for some reason, there is actually a history of mentorship between, a parental physician in the same specialty and the child physician in the same specialty. But those are relationships that are fraught with potential challenges and boundary issues. So you have to be aware of them. And of course, all networks have to be based on mutual learning and trust. This is a different way of looking at it. And in a program, you can have multiple characteristics or characterized types of mentors. The senior scholars and leaders, professional societies, administrators, trainees can create their own mentorship program along the gradation of PGY1 to PGY5, or chief residents can be the mentor for many others. However, junior residents are actually very fantastic mentors for medical students. As I said, peer mentorship, and of course, all mentorship programs should identify, in my opinion, the personal support system. And I'm going to say that, there is no other time than now in the pandemic that the concept of a personal support system mentorship has been more relevant. And it has very little to do with the academic career per se, but it has to do with what it means to have resilience when you're so sick and tired of sitting on a Zoom meeting and, you really have had it with baking bread. Or you're just exhausted from dealing with people all day because you haven't had a vacation in 14 months. That the personal support system mentorship is something that is new and really goes to the faculty wellness piece in a faculty development program? I don't have any answers, but it's something that I'm really struggling with because, seeing a lot of burnout amongst clinical faculty in particular, but even just the administrators right now, really trying to deal with that because the uncertainty, even from CARMs to whether electives are available in medical education, is a constant sense right now. Just today, there will be a discussion about extending the closure of electives, is just wearing us all down. So I really think that that's an area for great growth. Some of the challenging issues in that regard are, in fact, that between people generally, and we've seen this now in the evolution of expectations in academic medicine, is that we have disparate goals, commitments, and expectations. We call this the generational gap, but the reality is it's not generational. We're shifted from the concept of the physician being kind of a victim martyr. The martyr is that I'm always there. And there's still people I know, I don't think it'll be a secret for me to say that working with Richard Resnick, who was the dean at Queen's and the chair of surgery at U of T, he was very much a 24/7, 365-day guy. And his expectations were, if you didn't have that same expectation, you were not succeeding as an academic leader. I don't think we're at that stage right now. And in fact, there are a lot of unreasonable demands by mentors. I've been pushed back on my notion that we meet once a month and we have goals and expectations and evaluate. And then on the other hand, there are people who say they'll be mentors. It's why mentorship programs fail at medical schools, because mentors who sign up actually are never available. I've observed significant generational clashes and personality clashes. So I'll give you the example of one. Some people believe that some people are on Twitter too much. And that, not you, Teresa, don't worry. But I do think that we have students who are all over Twitter constantly. And in fact, even though they're being very careful, run the risk of breaching patient confidentiality. And there are a lot of people in academic medicine in my generation who shy away from all social media. That's a big clash, because for most people coming up through the ranks, social media is their way of actually not only communicating, but conducting qualitative research through polls, etc. So very interesting. The over-dependency of the protege is a huge issue. And it actually becomes a problem for me because, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And as an introvert, having people call me, 24 hours a day and intervene on my Saturdays and Sundays saying, and it does happen. As soon, there are some people you just don't look in the eye, right? Because as soon as you do, they tweet you and they text you and they email you and they call you a lot. How to deal with that is a real issue, because you don't want to hurt somebody and harm their mentorship relationship with you. But establishing those boundaries early on is going to be really important. I have observed very inappropriate advice by mentors to mentees, particularly by deans and associate deans and vice deans to students and residents at large. As I said, there's a risk. I've had to unfortunately untangle these things in the misuse of power and sexual harassment at least once a year. And then this happened to me very early on. As a PGY3, I was working on my first research project, and I didn't realize that my program director and the postgrad dean both felt that whatever I was working on, they could take credit for my work. And this happens with graduate students as well. So these are, very important issues. The last two are issues that go to policies at the medical school or at the institution that have to be invoked in the case of that level of inappropriate behavior. So let's talk a little bit about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to just pop along here. EDI is not, it is really driven right now by Black Lives Matter and by Justice for Joyce, both of which are incredibly, poignant and emotionally charged areas that I feel very strongly about. So, anyone asks me, like I did a couple of days ago at a big meeting of chiefs of the Anishinaabe Aski Nation, said I believe that racism needs to stop, and we will stop it by basically making it a crime in our medical school. But generational issues, race, gender, LGBTQ2S, Indigenous. Then there's the other visible minority, the ones who keep getting asked, but where are you really from? No, but where were you born? I go through this conversation all the time. Where are you from? I say Ottawa. Well, where did you go to medical school? I say Hamilton. But where are you really from? I say Ottawa. Well, where are your parents from? This goes on until I finally give in and say, no, my family are, I make something up, like, we were immigrants from post-World War II Argentina, something exciting and weird. And then that shuts people up. EDI also includes an embracing of different types of clinical research, including equity and diversity and inclusion of primary care research and qualitative research, which often get shoved to the side. Socioeconomic ability and disability. And EDI really means excluding assumptions based on everything that you know to be true. When it comes to race and gender, women and minorities have a greater need for mentoring. There's good studies on this. They end up, like I do, serving on multiple committees, what we call the minority tax. And it turns out that because of the homogeneity of senior faculty, many mentors are actually white men and may assume the father figure role. So you have to be careful of unintentional paternalism and sexual harassment when it comes to women and minorities, especially minority women. And in this regard, the reason why deans and schools fail is because there actually is a skepticism about planned or formal mentoring amongst current faculty. The first thing I heard at nauseam was, well, we talked about this and we tried it, but it didn't work out, so we're not going to do it anymore. But there's a huge need and a hunger for mentorship here at nauseam. The other problem that we have and others have is, in fact, the lack of time for faculty to participate at any level, because it is unremunerated. And in fact, because there aren't enough people, you may end up forcing skeptics to participate. There is an assumption that people don't need mentors. I've heard people say, well, I never needed a mentor. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a mentorship program. And numbers really do count here. We need to have enough people who are able to do the mentorship. And at nauseam, we're going to have to reach outside of our faculty because there aren't enough. The other reasons schools fail is because there's resentment amongst those not selected to participate. They are inadequately prepared. A lack of funding is a big problem, and a challenge for departments that are primarily clinical unless there's buyout for clinical time. So getting to yes, I think you have to ask yourselves, and I think you have a great program already, but what's your goal? What are you going to put in the effort? Are you going to make it visible? Are you going to make it part of promotion? Are there going to be awards for mentorship? And how will you measure your impact? The institutional role is basically the same thing. I won't read this. It's, make a program like you would any other program. And make sure you understand that everybody gets supported and validated. Everyone was there to shake my hand when I won the spelling bee, but you were there to hold my hand when I was practicing for the spelling bee. Faculty vitality means the ongoing realization of goals, and that is the career-long journey. It is not a destination. Mentorship is all about faculty vitality and maintaining the best, the brightest in the faculty. So I'm going to close with 3 metaphors. One is the otters. For those of you who may know that otters actually do not swim alone generally. Otters hold hands and swim on their backs. And a group of otters actually together form a raft. And many women in academic medicine, led by Mamta Gautam, who is a leading doctor's doctor, have formed a raft. Her program is actually called The Raft, and it's a mentorship program for women. I highly encourage signing up for it. but otters work on a raft. And so to me, mentorship is like a raft. We're all on our backs, but we're holding hands and we're protecting as a raft against any predators, but also the group of us keep the group of us afloat. My second most favorite animal are the meerkats. And if you haven't watched Meerkat Kingdom, you really should. I mean, if you have nothing else, you've done everything on Netflix, try to find something about meerkats to watch. It was a BBC special, and they followed the meerkat family throughout. And meerkats live, thrive, breathe completely as a family, usually in groups of 50. And they're all assigned various roles, but hunter, protector, mother, whatever. They're as cute as buttons, but they're crazy. In fact, their primary source of food is the scorpion. They have learned as a group how to de-sting the scorpion and then to eat it. It's quite weird, and if you watch them do it, it's actually quite gross. But the meerkats living, breathing together, they mentor babies as they are born, and they teach them how to hunt, how to kill the scorpion, how to survive against predators, mostly flying predators, and how to hide underground. It's a wonderful, wonderful testament to mentorship. And then, of course, if you haven't watched Happy Feet, I think you should. It'll cheer you up if you're down with the pandemic doldrums. But Happy Feet is all about one little penguin who got lost. But how penguins live in large, large groups, like thousands. They hunt together, they live together, they breed together, and they mentor each other. If they don't know, if a baby penguin doesn't know where its mommy is, they get adopted, they get taken care of. So, penguins, meerkats, and otters, I'm going to leave you with those three visions of what is successful mentorship. And amongst those three groups, there's absolute equity, embracing of diversity, and inclusivity as institutional evidence of successful mentorship. So Jonathan, I think that was 45 minutes. Let's talk about what's in the chat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Verma. My name is Deborah Cook. I work here at McMaster University in St. Joseph's in the intensive care unit, and I have really admired your role at NOSM. Thank you so much as co-chair of the grants committee at PSI, working with Sam and Robin and many other individuals. We've been very excited to see all the academic activity at NOSM, and your leadership is so important there. And here today talking about mentorship. There's a few questions, and I would love your reflections on as many of these as we can go through. You spoke about the way in which maybe there aren't enough people who think they could be mentors, and what's been raised is, what about problematic mentor-mentee relationships? I wondered about the notion not only of sort of training or orientation to encourage mentors to step forward or help them feel more empowered. I wonder what you thought about the idea of mutual evaluation processes for people in their career, who sometimes early career investigators, sometimes mid-career, as you say, sometimes senior, and their mentor, like that reflective self-evaluation or reciprocity of evaluation to try to perhaps mitigate some of the issues that might come up where mentoring has gone wrong, shall we say.
Well, I think that that's where MAC leads. Like, that's where I learned the concept of mutual evaluation. I don't know if you still do it, but my first tutorial group was led by PK Rangachari. And anyone who knows Rangachari, he was legend at MAC. I mean, he's the most eccentric, gastroenterologist there is, and deeply researcher, but a real Renaissance man. And he was very much about setting the tone about everybody doing mutual evaluation and creating this safe space in which, respectfully, there could be a bilateral and multilateral discussion that went beyond, I like your smiles and you were gender appropriate at every meeting we had, but actually said, I don't think you did the reading. And I think it shows that you may want to actually spend a bit more time focusing on physiology rather than on the easy anatomy, which is easy to take. So I think that Mac set the tone for me. That's where I learned it. And then I went from Mac to Queens in my residency and into the very, I would say conventional environment at Queens, which was a very kind of, you know, Ivy League. It was very different than Mac. And the concept of giving evaluation after a meeting, people would look at me like, what are you doing? So I realized that that was very much a wonderful tenet at Mac. And I think that you should be leading more on that in writing about how mutual safe evaluation, how it's done, where it's beneficial, and why it's important to do. And it can be replicated outside of the education tutorial group, but into meetings, into areas where there's dangerous and difficult conversations, like pulling together an anti-racism strategy, and why some people feel that this is not our job as academic institutions. But those difficult conversations need to be had and done in that context. And in mentorship. So, in one-on-one, I really, and it's hard. I have to tell you, sometimes people have said things to me and I've said, whoa. Like very recently, one of our board members actually said to me, you're actually saying things that I think are trying to influence me and you shouldn't be. This was just 3 days ago. And I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm really mad you said that to me. Then I had to really reflect on it and think, you're probably right. So a lot of it does require the emotional maturity as well to be able to take that level of feedback.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about the structural advantages of mentoring, and I think that reciprocity of feedback is useful. Even just thinking about the self-reflection of a mentor. I remember not having this formal exercise, but through a self-reflective exercise of my own, just realizing I hadn't done as much sponsorship as I could have. But it was only through the deliberate reflection and exercise that I set up for myself. It wasn't institutionally based. And I think that would be a great thing we could formalize here at McMaster, having lived through it and helped develop it and promoted it elsewhere. So thank you for that suggestion. What about interprofessional education and mentoring in that realm?
Well, so I'm not sure what happened to IPE, IPC, but it seems to have disappeared off the lens of academic medicine, at least, from what I've seen. It was, in the Future of Medical Education projects, both in undergrad and postgrad, identified as a major theme. But, somewhere along the last 5 years, it seems to have been lost, or maybe it's been subsumed into the culture. I don't know, but I don't feel like it's there anymore. And it bugs me because it was an area, my personal area of interest was in interprofessional education and interprofessional practice. And so, teams themselves, or interprofessional, multidisciplinary, clinical and academic and research groups, all should be able to cross mentor, because the skills are not, unless it's about a specific area of knowledge expertise, the skills across collaboration, communication, being an advocate, all of the other CanMed's roles, in fact, are all cross-sectional. They're all not particularly germane to being a physician alone. And some of my best mentors, in fact, the best mentor I ever had was the nurse who was in charge of our pod at the family health team at the Toronto Western Hospital. And to this day has stayed as one of my best friends. I called her last night just to talk about the fact that she's now retired and is volunteering doing vaccinations. And yeah, it's, nurses and pharmacists for a family doctor are amongst the best. They're not just teachers, they're mentors. They actually, you can learn a lot from them, and you develop a relationship if you're a family doctor in a particular community. I knew the 3 or 4 Shoppers Drug Mart and Rexall pharmacists in Dundas and Bathurst, and they were my mentors. So I think it's, you know, up to people. Most students and residents still want just physicians, but they just have to look across the you know, counter at when we're physically there at the ward clerk. The ward clerk and the emergency intake clerk can teach you so much as a mentor. And I don't mean just a teacher, watching how they interact with difficult people, how they manage challenging circumstances.
Mhm. Thank you. You spoke about the emotional intelligence might be ideal to be a mentor, and of course the time and skills and insight about how to do it. Would you like to say a word about mitigating maybe any emotional draining activities associated with mentorship? It's a question from Dr. Mark Walton. It's energy giving maybe, but sometimes draining.
Well, I usually like to talk to Dr. Walton so that I can get more energy, because he's like a squirrel. You know, he's got lots of positive energy, and he's also very pragmatic. So nice to try to get people that are in your life that aren't necessarily always emotionally draining, but there will be some people who will be. And I remember at probably the worst year of my life was 2016. It was a divorce. Both my parents died, and I was transitioning from U of T to, you know, not U of T world. And that was a big change in my life. Plus I sold my house and moved. So all of those are life changes. And during that time, I had one particular person who sees me as their mentor who was very needy. And I basically had to say, you know what? I actually don't have it. I don't have the ability right now. And I think that you have to be honest with people. Otherwise, it's just going to create lost expectations or disappointments, or, you know, the sense that you're under delivering. I think for me, and, you know, again, last week was a difficult week. We had a student who passed away, and we had a valued friend who was the partner of our vice dean pass away. Two deaths, and we're having a memorial on Friday morning, and my energy levels are low. In fact, I was kind of not only scared of this talk because I was scared of McMaster and scared of making mistakes, but also just tired. And I think when you are feeling that way, you have to admit it and just step away for a little while, or go, you know, make fun of everybody like I would have of Mark Walton in public in meetings, you know, and feel good about it.
That's awesome. Just we probably have time for one more question, if you don't mind. Someone was just texting me actually rather than the chat line. If you had one message for someone looking for a mentor, and the alignment request was within one's field of work, what would your main suggestion be, understanding there are myriad considerations? Something that perhaps is you have found most important, not spoken about very often, but you'd like to leave us with based on your years of mentoring and being mentored.
For me personally, it's psychological safety, especially because some of the things that I feel I deal with are, I mean, and I don't mean that sort of, you know, that term gets bandied around a lot, but I do mean, you know, the safety that is about having a relationship where almost anything can be said, like, you know, I don't know if I can actually do this, right? There have been times, just in the last, you know, 3 or 4 weeks, particularly when our school has, this is not in the news, so it's in the news, that half of our schools degree granting institutions have gone into financial insolvency. That has affected NASM. And at one point when I started to look at it, that plus, you know, the deaths and the pandemic, and we recently went through our virtual accreditation, there was a day I needed to say to somebody safe. And I have one person who is that person that I can say anything to, and I can cry, bawl my eyes out and say, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I mean, and that's the crisis thing, but they're a mentor because their job is actually not to validate and to sort of, you know, make me feel like, oh, well, poor baby, is to say, you know, you can. And this is why. These are your strengths. And it's again sort of a combination of psychotherapy, but mentorship is about feeling just as though you're completely safe to say that to somebody and they're not going to say to you later on, you know, well, I know, I remember. Do you remember in that year that you felt so bad and you weren't able to do it? Well, this is why you're, you know, you have these characteristics that are bad. I don't need to be criticized at that particular point. So I don't know how to say this to you other than, you know, yeah, those people, yeah, as Mark says, battle buddies and pandemic pals, peer-to-peer support. And in that clinical environment, especially if it's in your area of clinical expertise, you can always feel as though, you know, if you're against the grain, or you have, like just now, you know, the idea that 16 weeks is too far apart for the second dose. Some people feel that, and there's an op-ed today in the Globe and Mail about that by Isaac and David. They should feel like they can say that.
A great note to end on. We all need a safe harbor in a storm. Thank you so much, Dr. Verma, for your time today and your insights. I'll turn this over to Jonathan for a few final words.
Before we sign off, I just want to promote the Women's Symposium, April 28th, on leading healthcare. If you put your phone to your screen, you can get some more information, and it will direct you to registration and further information on what that event is all about. I do want to join with Dr. Cook in thanking you, Dr. Verma. Your stories have been poignant, they've been humorous. Your imagery and metaphors, particularly as you ended your presentation, speak to the richness of some of the ideas and how you've challenged us to think about mentoring at an individual level, but also within the institution, and the importance that we continue to do that. Thank you again to PSI for supporting this conference. And also a thank you to Samantha Applewhite, who has been the heart and soul to making this fairly complex two-day event work almost seamlessly. If I was going to choose a metaphor, it's very much like the calm of the duck on the water that's working furiously below the surface. And thank you to Samantha for all of her work. Please provide us feedback. There's a link in the chat as to where you can do that. We'd love to hear from you as to how we can make 2022 an even better event. And if you thought this morning was influential and helpful to your practice, we'd invite you to join us again this evening at 1700. You can use the same link that you registered with and accessed this morning to join us when Dr. Bridget O'Brien from UCSF is going to be talking about mentoring and the role of mentoring with our graduate students. For those of you who are heading off to practice this morning, I wish you a great day. For others who have other academic or personal or family work, again, hope you enjoy your day. Thank you for joining us.